The findings of the 2019 Global Risk Landscape Report reflect a globalized, interconnected world, and one in which press and hype cycles are influencing businesses' assessment of risk more than ever. This year, business leaders across EMEA, Asia Pacific, and the Americas agree that damage to reputation, cybercrime, and economic slowdown were their top 3 current threats. This is the first time in 3 years that the top 3 risks for business leaders have shifted away from including regulatory risk. Why do we think that damage to reputation, cybercrime, and economic slowdown are considered the top 3 risks for businesses in 2019?
So I don't think the results of the survey are particularly surprising in that we would expect to see all these risks high on any company's agenda. However, in our 2018 survey, UK executives were most concerned about geopolitical and macroeconomic risk. And while both of these risks remain important concerns for executives this year, for the first time we've seen damage to reputation or to brand value as the #1 risk for UK businesses. With the increasing use of social media and its ability to spread news faster than ever before, the ongoing risk companies face in managing their reputation and limiting damage to brand value when something goes wrong is unsurprisingly high up the agenda. We reviewed some research from 2018 where it was reported that in the UK 1 in 3 businesses have reported that negative content has already damaged their business. And with consequences ranging from loss of customer confidence to large fines for data breaches, it's easy to understand why these concerns have been building. And of course the consequences to businesses of being targeted by cyber attacks, which actually came up as number 2 in the survey, are closely linked to the issue of reputation. From a sector perspective, the survey indicates that respondents from the technology sector were much more likely to consider damage to reputation and brand the #1 risk, which could reflect their deeper understanding of the potential consequences of these sorts of risks. What was also interesting in our survey was that despite the considerable investments we know many businesses are putting in to protecting themselves from cybercrime, 33% of our survey respondents felt they were least prepared to deal with this issue compared to their arrangements to mitigate other risks. And then just touching on the economy, economic slowdown is the 4th key risk highlighted by the UK executives we surveyed.
How can organisations create a balance between mitigating short-term risks based on media hype and long-standing risks which may affect their business operations?
Over a third of UK businesses in our survey said that their risk registers are partly based on media hype rather than an analytical assessment of the threat. And when asked whether highly obvious threats are being neglected by the board in favour of the so-called black swan events, 30% of our survey respondents believe this happened regularly, and 44% agreed it happened on occasion. Similarly, a third of respondents believe their organisation's risk register is influenced by hype cycles, and only around a quarter believe that this is never the case. Some sectors are more concerned than others, so 52% of respondents in the oil and gas industry believe their organisation is regularly impacted by hype cycles, as are half of those in the real estate and construction industry. And 36% of respondents in the TMT industry also believe they're regularly impacted by hype cycles. The oil and gas industry obviously suffers from a very complex risk landscape. Press hype cycles commonly touch on environmental issues. We've seen activist protests across the UK dominating the press over the last month, and particularly recently in London. So we're seeing increasing media pressure on these businesses as the public is encouraged to question the behaviour of the industry. This complex climate is also regularly buffeted by complex political incentives, and of course the potential impacts on the oil and gas industry if a no-deal Brexit occur is also high on the industry's radar. And of course none of this is anything new, but it can make analysis of the risk landscape complicated, and there's a risk of a directionless approach to risk mitigation amongst all the noise. Media hype is an interesting issue because we've seen increasing concern about the impact of fake news, which has the power to change our perception of what is real or true. When it comes to risk management, companies may need to respond to media hype if the hype is impacted on what their customers want or how they perceive that business. In my experience, companies are not ignoring systemic risks, which are inherent to them doing business, but I think we still have a long way to go to really understand and quantify the risk landscape in such an interconnected world.
What should businesses be doing to better manage these risks?
There's no simple answer to what businesses should be doing to better manage risks, since many of the issues raised in the survey are complex and challenging. Our survey findings were that the majority, so 62% of respondents, believe their organisation's risk register fails to consider the interconnectivity of risks, and with 18% strongly agreeing with that. We also found differences in opinion on how frequently risks should be reviewed, with more than 50% of respondents in Europe more likely to see it as a continuous exercise compared to 40% on average in the survey. We're also seeing increasing emphasis on how businesses articulate their risk appetite and tolerance, and the extent to which they behave in line with their stated risk appetite. These things are becoming a measure of a company, of its concerns, how it views the world, and also its part within it. What is clear is that companies need to continue to invest time and resources into really understanding risks and their potential effects, using multidisciplinary teams, making use of the data and tools now available, but also applying fresh thinking and innovative approaches to identifying, understanding and mitigating risks. I also think fundamental to effective risk management is oversight and governance, which includes collective responsibility for risks. The recent reports on the impact of climate change on our world and the calls for a collective response is a stark example of why that is needed.
Every business continues to develop its own definition of risk and its own way of dealing with it. We are seeing their approach come under more scrutiny than ever, but now there's an opportunity to become a voice of authority. Proper risk management can enable businesses to flourish under consumers' confidence and the demonstration of shared values.